If you learn how to properly diffuse negative emotions, navigate them, you clear people's heads, and you have if you're in your default mindset, which is where you wake up in survival mode. As human beings, it's almost rock, paper, scissors on emotion.
Chris Voss is a former FBI hostage negotiator, known for bringing empathy and real-world experience to the art of negotiation.
This idea of creating common ground, what does it do in regarding making someone feel like you're one-upping them? And then what is a solution for them instead to kind of work on?
Yeah, well, sharing your common ground is...
In this episode, you're going to hear from former FBI hostage negotiator and best-selling author of the book Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss. What impresses me about Chris the most is how good of a listener he is. He'll talk about tactical empathy and he'll give you some tools and tricks, but what's so impressive to me is how invested he is in a conversation, even if it is in an area that he's not interested in. That really shows how much he cares and what he is trying to do along the way, which is build deep, meaningful relationships. Over the last couple years, I've had the chance of spending a number of days with Chris. And if you haven't had a chance to pick up his book, over 5 million people have read it. I highly recommend that you do so. And even better, if you could go to a negotiation mastery course, I'm sure it will help you in your personal life, business, and even in your relationships. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So we get into it, and my background in coaching, your background in a little different environments. I always talk about saying that I need to have skin in the game to feel like it's important enough for me to have a level of an impact. But in your world, in your history, is that skin in the game is a little different. I don't think a lot of people take that into consideration.
In the old life,
Yeah.
literal, right? Yeah, exactly.
So who is Chris Voss?
A regular dude, small town boy from Iowa, deeply flawed human.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, well, in point of fact, just trying to have a positive impact on the world. I mean, I realize that sounds cliche-ish, but somebody was asking me today about, if I wanted to expand a business, and he had thought, well, you talked about scaling, and I'm like, well, no, I never did. I could see why you heard that, but scaling means that I get to feel the impact less. And I really enjoy having a positive impact on people. So that's part of who I am.
A lot of people do that because of maybe past lives. They feel like they need to make up for some things that they did. They're like, well, what did you do?
Yeah, right? Like a lot of people that were complete mercenaries and cut everybody's throats and hurt people and fired everybody. And then after they made their billions and they have to atone for all the sins that they committed along the way, like, nah, I ain't that guy.
And then when they get to go, they make the money. So then they get to write their story however they want. And then they can say, this is how I am. This is who I am. And they get to kind of create that. I've been able to spend enough time with you to where I know that there's layers to you.
Thank you.
And that complexity comes from a level of intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
That even though every conversation you have, you don't seem bored and disinterested, even though that you're able to probably decipher what may be going on and where somebody else is without saying, I know that person's feeling. You're genuinely curious to have them like talk through it. Was that something that you always had, or is that a skill that you developed?
No, I think I've probably always been curious. Or interested in figuring out how to do things well. My father challenged us to figure stuff out growing up. But I think I've always been curious, I guess. Yeah.
Do you tend to find yourself with the repetitive nature of business? Business is very predictable. And I think that a lot of times people don't think that's the case because everything's interesting, but entrepreneurs tend to create their own level of chaos so that they end up self-sabotaging. They create a level of chaos so that they could feel like they're back in control.
Ooh, okay.
So what happens is as a business, you're mentioning scaling, as a business tends to scale, the business owner gets a little bit more removed from it. Right. So what they end up doing is they'll tend to self-sabotage, create more chaos so they could jump back in, fix the problem, and then feel like, hey, look what I do, look what I did. But in a lot of the work that you do now with entrepreneurs is about actually not split the difference, but sharing the difference, being able to get to the point where people are, they feel like it's a true win-win, and not cliche from the standpoint of, we always want to be in a relationship where it's a win-win, but in the sense of like people leave feeling like, I like that guy. What about maybe your history working in the probably most serious situations to now working in business that is more predictable and less emotional? Do you find like it intriguing to you to actually find the area to help somebody come to common ground, come to a level of what's a win-win?
So which part, like what intrigues me today?
Yeah. On the entrepreneur side, because in the, and we'll get to talking about your book. And I think a lot of people know you. I mean, you sold 5 million copies. Like at some point, I think the word's out. Like we know who you are now in the sense of the book, but this is just a part of your first mountain. And this next journey, it's not, it's the next journey is actually more predictable than all of the interactions that you've had with people in your past life, in my opinion, because that's probably where I am in the entrepreneur side. So what makes it interesting, even though it's more predictable?
Well, see, it's endless. There's endless innovation. There's endless novelty. The more you dive into something, the more novelty there is. And I'm not sure that novelty, to me, like novelty, like you buy a novelty in the store.
Sure.
But interesting and intriguing. And so we're constantly seeing new insights. My team, I mean, we talk about this all the time. So we're having the best time applying the new insights and helping people get better. And I was thinking about some of the insights today. We have typically taught people how to navigate negative emotions.
What do you mean by that?
Basically, human beings are wired to be very negative, 75% negative, pessimistic. That was required for survival skills. The old phrase, anybody who's been bitten by a snake is scared of ropes. Well, in a caveman, if something negative happened, didn't kill us the first time, it was going to kill us the second time. So we had to have an outsized reaction to negative things. Positive things, if we didn't learn the lesson, next time around, it's not going to kill us. Negative thing either kills us or the second or third time it's going to. So the cavemen that survived have an outsized reaction to negativity. We're wired with that. In very unscientific terms, we're 75% negative. And so if you learn how to properly diffuse negative emotions, navigate them, you clear people's heads and you have a massive competitive advantage. And so we really equipped people to deactivate the negatives, because the minute you sit down with me, if you're in your default mindset, which is where you wake up in survival mode, you're negative, 75% negative. You're skeptical, you're sitting back, you're thinking like, I could see how this could go bad. Somebody who looked like you did this to me in the past, and I'm reacting to that. So now we're actually exploring, when is it appropriate to be positive? And then how do you actually do that? And that's something that we just started talking about in the last couple of months. And I'm sitting down, we did our first annual negotiation mastery summit in Louisville. And one of the people that were there is a member of a very small group that we refer to as a cohort, like top level people. They can't get enough of this. The equivalent of Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods got coached all the time, and he spent 10 times more time in a practice tee getting better than he spent competing. So these guys come to every event that we put on, and they get coached, and we have simulations we put them through. They get something from us every week. And so one of these guys is talking to me, and he's telling me about a dilemma he's in. I said, well, there's this new thing that we call a GAP audit.
Mm-hmm.
Gratitude, appreciation, purpose, GAP. What is the other person thinking in their head, which is a focus on positive emotions authentically. Just started to experiment with that. This guy's never heard that from us before, from me, from any of us. We didn't even have it in the summit, because it's such its early stages. And to me, that's fascinating. And as I was driving over here, I'm thinking, all right, so an accusations audit, when is that your primary strategy? The dealing of the negatives, as opposed to when is it more appropriate to start with a GAP audit?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's fascinating to me. And that just came up in the last 2 months. And I know that next year we're going to be talking about something else new that we never thought about. So it's endlessly fascinating to me what I'm doing.
Yeah, we talk about in our company that innovation is praised, but execution is worshiped. So if you could take that innovation, we're going to praise you for it. We're pumped
Right.
about it because that means that your brain's turning, you're looking for ideas. But if you could implement it and execute on it,
Yeah.
because the power of practice is what closes the gap.
Yeah.
You spend, I would say, at the high performance in athletics, which is where I live, 99% of the work is not seen. And
Yeah.
and the thing for me that makes it easy is I fail faster and more than most coaches. Everyone's like, how do you feel so confident? I'm like, number one, like I have
had all the
confidence,
fear of failure.
but I just am not afraid to fail as much as you guys are. I just do it when no one's looking. So when the lights are on, well, guess what? We kicked your ass. But you guys are all worried about what people are doing when they're looking at you because you haven't put the work in when no one's looking. And it's the power of practice that closes that gap because we do something 1,000 times, and on 1,002, all of a sudden I figured this one little thing out.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I know when I was talking with you last, I was overcomplicating something. And I get in my own head and I have a conversation and I'm like, we're trying to like give people's names so that they are positioned better, so that there's like a little bit of an advantage, right? Like passing the baton, where you're already in first place versus kind of coming on that fourth leg and you got to run your ass off to catch up to people. And you just said, I'm just Chris. You don't need to give anyone a big title. You don't need to get on a phone with anybody. You just say, hey, I'm just Chris. And I'm just like, shit, it is sometimes that simple, but that simplification comes from years of experience and toying with it and playing with it. So a lot of times these innovations, they don't necessarily work if you don't put the time in to test them in different environments.
And sometimes the innovation is not that sexy.
No, I mean, I think the sexiest part of it is if it's simplified to where it works in all different environments. And I think that's what's really cool about your work, and it's quite surprising because, when I first met you, I had been a fan, and I think the book is incredibly well written. And I'm confident to tell you I've read it multiple times. I think the audio is fantastic. But listening to your life stories are very intriguing, and just putting yourself in that experience it's exciting to be a part of something that like almost, in business, we meet mentors to collapse times. We have coaches to collapse time.
Yes.
But when you're in a book and you collapse your own time and like the hours go by, that means that it's like drew you in, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So the book is so well done and to kind of be part of that journey, which is really unique. But to see it now being applied, the same strategies and tactics being applied to making impact in people's lives, that is not your fight or flight, your life or death, getting your kid home, but to be able to probably provide for that kid, to create an opportunity for your kids to go to college, to support a community,
Right.
to support business owners. Because one good twist of the right screw will make a massive impact in the negotiation tactics that you're delivering for a business.
Yeah.
And I do believe is like the power of the simplification that you've done is removing the complex comes from years, but also quality reps. So not just volume of time, but quality repetitions
Right.
of practice. So in the work that you do now in business, primarily, there's a gap between, your best salesperson and probably, your average salesperson.
Yeah.
And that person may have charisma. That person may have, just more persistence. That person may follow a better system of how he follows up, whatever it may be. But are you noticing within the work that you do that you're able to kind of close the gap of your elites and your average people if they have the interest to learn because of the techniques that you're picking up?
Yeah. If then that critical issue is, do they have the interest to learn? And it's shocking. Or how do they decide how to learn? Like some people have decided that if experience is the best teacher, it's going to be my only teacher.
That's very painful then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you don't learn that much.
I joke around, but it's one of the best lessons that I ever learned is a quote that I lived by, which is smart people learn from their mistakes, but wise men learn from others.
Theoretically, yeah.
I've had a lot of others in my life that help me and guide me to show me what not to do.
Yeah.
But oftentimes if you're only using experience, you're going to do some damage to your body. You know, in the world of athletics, if you only want your own experience, your knee's not going to hold up, your back's not going to hold up.
Right.
So do you want to at least be like, hey, that's probably not the smartest idea. So let's take it to the people that actually have the intention to get better.
Right.
Then is it just a mechanics thing? Is it just a skill thing? Do you feel like maybe that there's certain traits that they have to already have other than the interest of the intent to learn and get better?
Well, first I think is coachability, and next is hard work. And then what's driving you? Ambition versus competition. And when I really started thinking about this a lot, I'm watching a show, Quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins, Pat Mahomes, and Marcus Mariota. I think is the third quarterback. And they're diving into these three guys. And I had already been alerted to the attribute of ambition from Masterclass. And how did I get on ambition? Masterclass originally told us that the profile of their best client is a cat, curious, ambitious, 30-something. Curiosity again showing up. Ambition. I'm like, oh, ambition, that's interesting. What about ambition? And if you're ambitious, you're by definition innovative, which means you're not copying others, you're creating, you're not perfecting. So I got this in the back of my mind, and eventually I'm going to meet Kirk Cousins, and he's going to say, why do you keep bad-mouthing me? Kurt, I apologize.
He's a good dude, by the way.
I'm sure he is. I have no doubt. But he strikes a very competitive perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? First of all, to be a perfectionist means you're always going to be unhappy, because perfection is a fool's errand. But if you're striving for perfection, striving for excellence, Tiger Woods strove for excellence. Now that's different, because perfection means if you're mad at yourself for making mistakes, you're going to be kicking your own ass too much. Secondly, you're going to figure out what's the best way to do something, and then I'm going to perfect that throwing motion. Now, Kirk Cousins going to get you into the playoffs on a regular basis. Got a bunch, much better than the vast majority of the quarterbacks in the NFL. Got a lot of teams into the playoffs. Solid guy, wins a lot of games. And I thought, eventually maybe you'll win a Super Bowl, maybe. And that guy will get you into the playoffs, and you're going to have a successful franchise. You're going to have a good team behind him. But he's going to try to perfect his throwing motion. Pat Mahomes try to perfect his throwing motion? No, he's thrown behind the back. He's mad at Travis Kelce on one play, throws in a ball behind his back. Kirk Cousins would never do that. Pat Mahomes is having a ball.
Yeah, I would challenge that.
How many passes how many sidearm, underhand, behind the back passes Kirk Cousins thrown?
Skills and
how many has he thrown?
Not nearly as many as a young quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, but
is Pat Mahomes still going to be throwing crazy passes when he's 37?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it ain't youth. It's an attitude towards life.
It's an attitude towards how he approaches the game, because what gets you here may not get you there.
So you're disagreeing with me on what point?
That number one, winning in the world of sports is a different mindset. Number two, you're dealing with a multifactorial environment. So there's
the winning in sports, a different mindset from winning where?
Not from a sport in general, right? So football, baseball, doesn't matter what the sport discipline is, but winning, I do not feel as if like Kirk Cousins is not a winner. And I never said that.
He gets into the playoffs. He wins more games than he loses. He's worth every dollar he got paid. How many? Because he's gotten multiple teams into the playoffs.
Sure, but what we're dealing with in the world of the team sport environment, it is such a multifaceted dynamic and reasons why a team is going to win. Putting it on that single quarterback, which is the highest responsible position on the field, the mindset in which you're describing, because I have intimacy within the world of that, right, in sports specifically, probably a little bit emotionally attached to it too, on both ends, right? No, the parties.
You're a perfectionist.
No, not by any means. I'm a winner.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I believe you learn more from your wins than you do from your losses.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've won a lot for 20 years.
Yeah.
Because when you have pride in your work, when you have your pride in your skill, you approach what you won and the opportunities that you could have done better differently than if you lost that game and you say, we got to do this better. Of course we got to do that better, but that's not why we lost. So for instance, in coaching, you'll see championship programs are going to get punished more when they win than when they lose. It is it's common across elite performers and winners.
Right.
But in the people that are above average, that are the best, that are great, but they don't win the championship, you'll see the exact opposite. And this is a commonality across all sports, that the coach is going to do more film work when they lose. The coach is going to do more punishment to the athletes. Say, hey,
Okay, so more film work is one issue, but then punishment to the athletes, is that an issue of coaching as opposed to the fact that they lost?
So the framework in which a coach is looking at the game. So if they lost, on average, that coach is going to punish them more because of the loss in all of the areas where they messed up.
He's trying to get execution.
And then in a team where a team that wins the Super Bowl, a team that actually, you look at a Bill Belichick environment consistently, you could look at it a pattern. You look at, even going back into the Cowboys days, and you look at Jimmy Johnson era, and you start looking at, you could even go further back, right? And you start looking at the championship coaches. They punished players by the world of punishment, if we were to kind of define it, more when they won than when they lost, because the missed opportunities for when they were doing when they won were going to actually show up in the championship games later. But the teams that lost got punished more in the games that they lost. And this is very like a easy pattern recognition across all championship teams. And the reason why is because winning environments and winning coaches and winning players look at things as missed opportunities. And it's not this idea of perfectionism, it's this opportunity for growth. They get to do that. The Kobe's of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Tigers of the world, they're going to do it until they can't get it wrong. So there's so many different factors to a football team, a team sport, winning versus losing. And then the way that they approach that is drastically different post the game's result. And if you look at the pattern recognition of some of the things that are very clear across the teams that win versus the teams that lose, one of the biggest common factors is post a loss, more punishment for a team that loses a Super Bowl versus a team that wins the Super Bowl that year. Post a win, more punishment. And the way that they approach execution of their game the next week. And that's a very, again, not a sexy statistic that you don't know unless you're getting into winning environments.
Okay.
So, and I'm not getting into a personal thing, but with Mahomes, athletically, gift-wise, look, the guy knows how to fucking win. At the end of the day, it's like going into the Brett Favre's. Who do you want as a 2-minute drill? What, every decade you get a player that you're saying, I'm picking that guy to go do, like, I don't care if he's not as technically sound as Andrew Luck. I'm not care if he's as technically sound as certain people. Who do you want as your 2-minute drill? And Patrick Mahomes is a guy that just finds a way to win. When shit goes wrong, he finds a way to win. And I love the analogy that you pull out regarding the perfectionism, but the psychologies are different than the winning factor. So a good comparison to the position, a cornerback has to have amnesia. They get burnt and they get touchdown scored on them. The next play, they're talking shit because that's gone. That's in the past. The problem with quarterbacks, though, is that play's still in their head. And that's the perfectionism that I hear what you're saying. Maybe what is showing up with Kirk Cousins, because he's still lagging. He's still bringing that history into the next play, whereas Patrick Mahomes is just out there slinging it. That may be what you're referring to that I'm hearing. I may be wrong, but I'm interested to hear your take on that.
On which part?
The difference between a corner getting burnt, missing a play, getting a touchdown scored on him, having amnesia, where his brain, he forgot about that play, showing up the next play and he's still able to talk the same level of crap that he's used to doing because that's his approach to the game, versus a quarterback bringing in his last drive and like, oh, I can't throw that ball there because this is what happens. And I can't throw that ball there because this is what happens. Patrick Mahomes has more of the personality of a corner where he has just amnesia. He gets rid of it and he just throws. Whereas Kirk Cousins is definitely somebody who's overthinking that play, and he's more critical about every single step and every action than maybe Pat is.
Right. Well, I mean, from what I've seen across sports, I mean, I think every player, what you're referring to as amnesias, are what's the emotional residue that you're carrying forward. And I'm watching something about tennis players recently. It was talking about the mindset of the top 5 tennis players in the world is vastly different than the 25 behind them.
Absolutely.
And so, but they're still the top player in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was essentially what I hear you describing, an emotional amnesia.
More eloquent way you present it, for sure.
But the corner gets beat.
Yeah.
He's got to remember how he got beat. It's just, is he beating himself up emotionally over getting beat? Or is he dumping it emotionally and going? Well, so is a quarterback, so is a tennis player, so is a golfer.
Point taken. Absolutely. Yeah. That not only is that very true, and some people do it more than others, but that emotion normally carries them more negatively than it does positively.
Yeah.
Because the negative.
I mean, there's sort of, there's effectively, as human beings, it's almost rock, paper, scissors on emotion.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're down, the thing that's going to get you out of being down faster than anything else, not only just faster, is anger. Like if I'm sad, depressed at any point in time, I will intentionally think of somebody or something that made me angry, and I feel the chemical changes instantly.
Absolutely.
Soaking it up. You're not in your highest, your highest ability to perform is flow. Very unscientific term, but flow is highly positive. Michael Jordan is famous for, everybody said, don't piss him off, don't insult him. Story after story after story. Somebody slights him, a coach slights him in a restaurant. Do not give Jordan motivation. Don't make him mad.
Yeah, if he's got a reason to be pissed, it gets him moving faster.
Now, Jordan creating with his tongue out, faking a dunk, switching hands, coming under, the look on his face is not anger. It's his flow state. He hit 6 3-pointers in a row in a game. That ain't anger on his face. Jordan with his tongue out, that ain't an angry dude. That's in a guy in a highly positive, highly creative sense. But you can't get there. Jordan showed if you're down, you don't go straight to positive. The quickest way to get there is to go anger first and then come up to positive.
How do you control that though?
The recognition of it. It's just recognition. Like I think as a competitor, and one of those things that I think almost a cliche that the best players in the world are never the best coaches.
Yeah.
Like he just,
MJ's a horrible coach.
or Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
Everybody thought he was going to be a great coach because he coached so well on the floor. But what happened when he coached the Lakers? The entire team quit on him. Jordan found his way there somewhere along the line, and it wasn't part of him becoming who he was, the need to explain how he got there. And so then I think most great performers are almost disdainful of the people that won't put in the work and figure it out for themselves. Tiger Woods famous for being disdainful of other golfers who were physically far more gifted than he was. And he was disdainful of them because he knew they had more physical talent than he did, and they didn't put in the work. And he looked down on them because you could be better than me if you weren't so lazy.
Yeah. It's an interesting take because everyone needs their own individual motivation, and sometimes like it's self-inflicted wounds, right? We self-sabotage, but then we're also self-motivating, because if you have good awareness and I know that that's going to drag me, then I need a reason. Why are you looking at my girl like that? I'm like, no, I'm looking over there. What are you talking about? Like, no, I know what you're doing. And then you start to tell yourself these stories so then I need a reason to not like you.
How do I get focused in the moment? Yeah. How do I stop my distractions? And anger is a great way to focus yourself. And most people don't realize that to get to the next level, it ain't with anger. because the scientific data is there that you're dumber when you're angry. And simultaneously, the flow
I'm
state,
literally laughing because I'm like, damn, all right, there's been some dumb moments.
Yeah, but
Normally when I'm angry.
you were better than when you were down.
Yeah.
Because you're listless, you're lethargic, you're not going to get anything done. But the flow state, and for most of the neuroscientists don't like the term flow because it's unscientific. Stephen Kotler, a friend of mine, sort of a layman's expert on flow, it's highly positive, highly positive, and which is why it tends to be so addicting because people. And then the other bizarre thing about flow state, if you can achieve it on a regular basis, one of the things I think is cool about Stephen, he had Lyme's disease, incurable, right?
So it says.
He doesn't have it anymore.
There you go.
And I asked him about it. I intentionally, because I knew what the answer was, and I asked him in a public forum.
Nice.
And it was, we're on the Zoom
That's
call.
a good friend. That's a good friend.
Well, I wanted other people to hear the answer. I knew what he was going to say, but it's a Zoom call, a couple hundred people on it. You got your questions, text us the questions, and then you can ask them.
Sure.
So I know Stephen. I've read his books. I love his books.
Great books.
And I knew his answer was going to be flow. So in a text, I said, question I want to ask Stephen is, I know he had Lyme's disease, and the guy looking at us right now does not have it. And all sorts of people chimed in because you could see the text, Lyme's disease is incurable. I know, this and that. Everybody's telling me what's going on. So I asked him, and he says, the best guess is the flow state triggers so many chemicals that are good for you that it drove it out of his body. And plus he sticks to flow on a regular basis now. His goal is, it's always a temporary state, but he's doing everything he can do to get back into it.
Yeah. So from, this may or may not be interesting to you, but there's really there's 4 dysfunctions of the body, and then there is a 5th one that we'll kind of discuss, but it interlines with one of the 4. So you have neurological, right? You have structural, right? Musculoskeletal, and then biochemical, right? What's actually happening hormonally, the bloodstreams, everything else.
Okay.
The 5th one is bioenergetics.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. And the reason why that is not its own, it's outside of it, is because it's interlaced between all of them.
Right. Connected to them all.
And that's the thing, is like the fact that bioenergetics is connected to all of them, but we can test it. Most people don't like it because it's so fragile and it's very finicky. But you can control it. You could test this in so many different ways, whether it be freezing water, whether it be actually doing heat maps, whether it be us sitting here right now, we could look at like heart rate. There's so many different ways in which we can actually test this, that we know it's real. And neuroscientists to physicists, they've proven all of this. But it's not really useful if you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like, hey, okay,
operational.
thanks, but that doesn't help me much.
Now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. So you just like word vomit a whole bunch of shit. Now I'm smarter than you because I have this medical background, but that doesn't really help me.
Right.
So what's really cool is whatever the science says, right? It's one thing, but normally science is not testing the outliers. My work in sport, most people say what we do is impossible. Like, that's the fun part of it. Because if I do not see a value of me being inside of an environment or inside of a situation that will change the outcome, then what's my point being there? Like, if I can't make a difference as an environmental change to the culture, then do I need to be there?
You're not interested in being a tourist.
I don't. And I don't. I have no desire to be in an environment where I'll weigh the boat down. And because to me, it's like it becomes its own, like, I hitched a trailer to somebody, I'm a victim. And it's like, maybe that's not true either, but it's not that I need to be the center of attention, because in the world of sports, I mean, I put a lot of people on the podium. I've never stood on one. So it's not about me, but I need to know that, like, what I'm doing is actually valuable. And I don't get any like self-satisfaction to just be a part of the ride. Like, I don't need a logo in a color scheme in a jumpsuit, Maybe when I was younger, that was exciting. I didn't, but gear You can't take gear to the bank, right? And whether it be cash in a check or cash in, like an emotional deposit of like my significant value in that environment was the fact that the outcome would have been different if I was in it versus if I wasn't in it. And the energy that you bring into an environment affects your mental state. It affects your emotional state. It affects the tactics that you apply to things because you give it hope. We talked about this, I think, the first time I met you, which is, I truly believe this in the world of sports, because when you deal with competition, it's a big deal. Hope is a drug. It's not a strategy. If I'm fighting you, right, and it doesn't matter the discipline, but if I give you a little bit of hope, you're going to come on, you're going to smell it. And then all of a sudden it bumps your adrenaline up, and then all of a sudden you get some momentum. But if you live off of hope, that's not a good strategy.
Right.
So you could give them a drug, they could take a bump of it, but you don't want to like let that become someone's strategy. So it could actually be it could be a dead path too.
Right.
So I see that. And when it comes to like flow state, when it comes to changing environments, environment always wins. Well, what environment are you creating neurologically, cellularly, emotionally? And flow state creates an environment where cancer can't live. And whatever that cancer is, and again, we're using this, like from a theory standpoint, that may be a disease, that may be, someone says you can't do something. All that is that negative thought, and you have to replace it with something positive. You can't just pull the empty thought out and then leave dead space.
This is a vacuum.
You have to take that spot out, and then you replace it with something.
Right.
So you bring this up to everybody publicly because you want him to actually explain it. I'm sure the chats go crazy because they're all like in denial. It's not curable. It is curable. What did he say to the reason why that flow state was what drove it out? Was it something that you believed? Because a lot of times people don't believe that, like they won't believe that. Is it a conviction in what he says, the way he says it? What was the thing that made you believe like that guy's telling the truth, even though science says no?
Well, first of all, he wasn't lying when he wrote about having Lyme's disease.
In the first place, yeah. Okay.
And so the dude that I was interacting with, actually the guy I've known all along, has none of the symptoms. And he talked about the fact when he had Lyme's disease, he couldn't get out of bed. He was suicidal. His life was falling apart. And then inadvertently, he triggered a flow state. Surfing is one of the things that triggers flow. And I remember asking him about this because is like rock climbing the same, because it requires very intense concentration. A lot of people love rock climbing because it clears their head. And he said, I think one of the problems is you need stimulus coming at you really fast, so you have to survive. Hence the difference between climbing a rock and riding on a surfboard.
Absolutely.
So to paraphrase his story, his buddies, he liked to surf before, his buddies talk him into going surfing. He drags his ass out. A wave just kicks the dog shit out of him. He barely survives. He washes up on a beach and goes, I feel better. What just happened? And so he starts to explore it, and he's got to replicate the experience. And so that was, I think, the principal thing that started his journey of the pursuit of what is this thing called flow? What difference does it make? How do we harness it? How do we do it?
That's cool. Do you do something along those lines in your daily work?
Yeah, not exactly. Try to maintain different attributes, modifications of it. The thing I'm thinking about most these days in terms of how will I perform better, on Huberman's podcast, he's got a guest, and the name of her book is Chatter.
I just bought that book because someone recommended it to me about a month ago.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, and so I'm thinking like, I need to get behind the chatter in my head a little bit more, because, I do the gratitude exercises. I work on staying positive. For lack of a better term, the 5 pillars of physical and emotional health, which are diet, exercise, sleep, spirituality, and relationships. I'm working on all that. And I think if you've got your mind around practices for those, some of those are like table stakes.
Yeah.
As you know,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get a good night's sleep. It doesn't matter. You can't outrun a bad diet. There's certain things that are just
I know.
table stakes for the price of entry, right?
Yeah.
Relationships, got to work at them. Not quite as easy, a little bit more of a task. Spirituality, in the broadest terms, a necessary thing. So then what's another piece? If we have anywhere from 10 to 50,000 conversations in our head every day, the chatter, and whatever the number is, it's a ridiculous number.
Yeah.
What I've read is they're repetitive. Over and over and over, thinking the same thoughts. So how do we make the repetitive conversations positive? And it's a little bit more than positive, it's actionable. Listening to Robert Cialdini in a conversation at Joe Polish's Genius Network one time. I take away something from Cialdini every single time. And he said, don't congratulate your employees for doing a good job. Congratulate them for being persistent. Because doing a good job is an accomplishment. But persistent is a way of being, an attitude. So how do you translate that to your chatter? You say to yourself, I'm happy. You say to yourself, I make my own luck. You say, you don't say I'm in a good mood. You say, look, I'm diligent, and because of that, things will work out. What do you repeat in your head over and over again? It's not just positive. But what I took away from Cialdini and the chatter thing combined together is I got to say to myself, I'm persistent, things tend to work out. Then I don't get down. I don't start kicking my ass. A setback, a defeat is not insurmountable. The chatter with the top five tennis players in the world, saying like, all right, so I missed that point, but I'll get the next one. I'm exactly where I want to be in the world. I'm living a dream. Somebody's got Aaron Donald mic'd up. And I don't know what the context was, but he's walking back and forth on the field, pacing a little bit, waiting for the next play, saying to himself, living the dream, living the dream, living the dream. That's a highly
bad man too.
And it's highly positive chatter.
Yeah.
That's not like, oh man, I'm going to tear his head off. It's more to a flow state. It's more forgiving. It's letting the moment before where who knows, did he get beat on the previous play? Did he sack the guy in a previous play? But what's the chatter in his head is highly positive and actionable in a way that gives you resilience. So you asked me before, like, what am I doing?
Sure.
I'm thinking a little bit more about chatter these days. What's my chatter? I do stupid ass chatter. Like I see a clip of Bill Maher on my Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I follow him for a variety of reasons. And so I imagine myself answering that question and having an argument with Bill Maher. That's a waste of time. I ain't never going to be on Bill Maher. We're never going to sit across from each other.
We should. I think it'll be a great conversation.
It ain't never going to happen.
We should make it happen. We should make it happen. Yeah, we need to make it happen. A couple of his knucklehead friends are playing tonight too, which is crazy.
All right.
Oh yeah. Oh man. So it's interesting because you mentioned Aaron Donald, and he is a bad man. Like, that is a dude that could hurt somebody.
Yeah.
He mentored a kid named Kobe Turner, who I've trained since he was in middle school, all through high school, college, went to Richmond, Wake Forest, and then goes out to LA. And his year underneath him, has a great year. Rookie goes over there. And if you listen to him, you'll see a lot of similarities now. And it's amazing how quickly somebody picks something up from a great person because you identify. And Kobe had, he's probably, in my opinion, one of the top rookie defensive players of the year when he's already having, in my opinion, like an incredible young career. He's just getting started, but I've known him since he's a baby. And when you just take somebody like that and you connect them to someone who's at an elite level, the standard gets set. And then the voices in their head, they almost don't let you have negative chatter because they'll see the end result. So like your physical reactions, your eyes, they're lagging indicator of your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
They're not a leading indicator. They're lagging is a delay.
Yeah, good point.
And that delay, the great ones know that delay because they've done it themselves. And they go, ooh, I ain't gonna let you pick up that bad habit, youngin.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I know you're just a little pup, but we're not gonna start to develop those traits. And he would nip that early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And within a year, you're seeing a kid who wasn't expected to be that star. And part of it is just the voice. Now, if physical traits, people have it or they don't, right? They're developing it. That's one thing. But that's a skill that happens from an environment. That's a skill from
Yeah.
someone who's at a greatness level. Like, how much better would you be if you were working with Tiger Woods? Now, that doesn't mean that Tiger's going to coach you. How much better would you be if you played next to Michael Jordan? It doesn't mean Michael's going to coach you, but you're seeing what greatness is like. So I say that to say that I believed for a long time that I was very good at negotiation. And I grew up, my dad was negotiator for the Benevolent Association for the fire department. I grew up listening to the Power of Negotiation cassette tapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've presented on this.
Yeah.
So when I had the opportunity to meet the great Chris Voss, I had to figure out a way to get in that room. And I was quite surprised. I was very surprised about a lot of different things about your personality that I met in person. And not trying to like take over the room. There's a lot of times when people ask questions that sound smart. A lot of times people, they're not looking for actual coaching. They're not looking for feedback. And it's like, all right, how do I get the most out of this relationship? Because it's very short-lived as far as in the context of these events. And I would ask questions of like, all right, where am I the most vulnerable? Like, what do I not want to tell people? Before I'd go into the meeting, like, all right, what do I want to, like, what am I creating a lie about that I've told myself? So it is so true, but everyone else that really knows me, my wife and the people that are tight are going to like call me out on. All right, tell a stranger that, see what he does, And I had the opportunity, we played a little bit of the role-playing game. You're a great listener. I do think that you actually come across very threatening. And that
Yeah.
may be because of this other like image around you and other environments. Maybe it's just the fact that you're a little leathered nowadays and you're not as young as you used to look. But when you're in the conversation, you don't make it about you. And one of the hardest things that you've taught me, but it was fucking hard, was not get common ground. And I started the conversation about Kobe because I trained him since he was a baby. His older brother, AJ Turner, was a great running back. And he was just along for the ride, and he didn't have the discipline and the commitment when he was younger as a football player. And he figured it out. Now he plays for the Rams. It's amazing, right? And he's the guy right behind Aaron that was coming into the career. And I created common ground to the conversation to bring up this point of it was one of the hardest things that I had to work on since you taught me not to do it. Because it's so easy for me to take my experiences and be like, I want to like, hey, I know I've been part of that
You
too.
get triggered. Yeah.
And been playing with it, and it's difficult. It's not easy at all.
Yep.
But the depths of conversations I have happen so much faster.
Yeah. All right.
Because I'm not doing that. For the people that don't know this idea of creating common ground, what does it do in regarding making someone feel like you're one-upping them? And then what is a solution for them instead to kind of work on?
Yeah. Well, sharing your common ground is a rush, because somebody says something to you and you get triggered and you remember all these emotions and you want to share them. But the problem is the other person feels shut down, and the other person feels like, I was trying to tell a story. You had to top me. You had to top me. You had to have a better story. Like consistently, that it's crazy. And no, we tend not to see it because when we're sharing, we feel so good in the moment.
Yeah.
And we want to relate. Like our intention is so overwhelmingly to connect because we feel connected. And the connecting neurochemical oxytocin, some people refer to it as a love drug. It's more the bonding drug. It's a one-way connection. And when you feel it, it's a rush. And it's hard to imagine that the other person doesn't feel it too. We have this problem in hostage negotiation all the time because we were talking to a bad guy, and a lot of police departments say, if you got an assault, don't tell the negotiators. because they're so connected to the bad guy that they're going to warn them. And the negotiators are always like, the fuck are you talking about? Well, we've been listening to how he's talking to you. Bad guy connects to us. We didn't connect to them, but nobody really knows that it's always a one-way dynamic. Your kid is born. You get hit with maybe the largest dose of oxytocin your entire life.
Life-changing.
Life-changing.
I didn't know that emotion existed until my son was born.
Yeah.
And anyone that's like, I get it, I have a dog. Shut the fuck up.
No.
You don't have a kid. And that doesn't against, I'm all about that. I didn't know that existed until it happened.
Yeah. But your kid doesn't bond to you. Kid doesn't know who the hell you are. Kid bonds to you over the course of the first year, starting with they've found out that there's something called the detachment syndrome, where children who are not held enough in the first year of their life don't attach. What does that mean? That when you laid eyes on your kid, they looked at you, and if they could process it, they'd be like, well,
okay,
maybe.
I'm gonna look like that. I'm screwed.
Yeah. Who is this nurse?
Try that.
Yeah, nurses are saying I look just like him. I don't see it. But so then getting back to sharing common ground, sharing it feels so good that we can't imagine that the other person's being shut down by it. One of the guys I'm coaching now, phenomenally successful entrepreneur. And he's great at attribute we call gather data with your eyes or listening with your eyes. And when we made him aware of this, he said, now I can see as soon as the words, I know what you mean, I watch people shut down as those words come out of my mouth because they're used to the other person playing, can you top this? And they're just like, God. And even if you can, let's say you had the same circumstances. It was different for them than it was for you. It just was. And how rare are those circumstances? And then is your ability to connect only with people you have common ground with. In the event that we were both at recently, we were doing the exercises and triggering passions and what gives people their love and their mission. So walk over, see a couple of people talking. One dude just asking nothing but what questions, which are exhausting unintentionally. Yeah. And so I say, use a label. He says, what's a label? I don't know what it is. Let me jump in. And I labeled the guy. And the guy I labeled said, when my son was murdered. Now, if you live on common ground, how the hell are you going to relate to that? But he said it in a way like everybody in the group looked like they got hit with an electric shock and they wanted to run for the door.
Nobody wants to have a conversation with that feeling.
Yeah, but now me, I'm like, first of all, he's saying this as a way that it's given new meaning to his life that he never had before. And he's dying to share. And how am I supposed to relate to that? Number one, like my dog got ran over?
Yeah.
Like even if that had happened to my son, it's not his experience. If I'm relying on common ground, I'm scared to death of this. But instead, because I'm curious and I know that he brought it up. So if I'd have known that his son was murdered and I brought it up, I'm out of line.
Yeah, it's a different conversation.
1,000%. Yeah. But if he brings it up, he's dying to talk about it. And so
what a gift.
I dive in.
But what a gift. I mean, if someone feels comfortable to share something with you that's so uncomfortable that you don't have common ground, then there's something about that relationship that is two ways versus just one way, like you're mentioning.
Yeah.
So that you are able to make a connection because that person is sharing and then you can have a conversation, not because you're connecting with them through
my own experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the same experience as you. And even if we did go through it, as you mentioned, we have different approaches and feelings.
Yeah, we reacted differently.
One of the big wake-up calls for me was, I know how you feel. And that was another one that I chuckled because I see this a lot within the sport and coaching community. When I work with an athlete, I know how you feel. I see it all the time. And I'm like, whoa, like, coach, you missed that kid so bad. And then you wonder why that kid doesn't, run to the wall for you, but you missed him. And you see it with entrepreneurs all the time. Like, oh, I lost my house and the business wasn't doing well. You don't understand. Like, I completely get it, man. I understand exactly how you feel. And I'm just like, oh, that hurts. It hurts. What do you say to that? And what can people do?
All right. So, first of all, stop saying it. But secondly, go with what your gut is telling you they are feeling and throw it out there. And instead say, right now, this is what you're feeling. Throw it out there. People are scared to death of being wrong. I don't know. I guess maybe that's why they say, I know how you feel. But throw out what you think they feel. Now, here's what's going to happen. You nail it and they love it.
Mhm.
You miss and they correct you, which now they're collaborating with you. A lot of people don't realize to correct is to collaborate. And most people hate to get corrected because it's annoying, but it's embarrassing. And so coach probably says to himself, I'm supposed to know more than this kid. He's relying on me to be smarter than him. So if I just go ahead and throw out what I think he's feeling and I'm wrong, it's going to be embarrassing. He's going to doubt me. He's going to think that I'm not omnipotent, that I'm flawed, that maybe I don't know what I talk about. There's so many ways these fears play out in our head. But what to do instead, you could even say, it seems like you're feeling X, which is a great way to tentatively test in a way that invites correction and says that you're open to it. So if you think you know how somebody feels, throw it out and find out. One of my guys on my team shared a stat with us just the other day that said it takes about 6 seconds for a neurochemical to work its way through your system. So let's say that what you said was completely right or completely wrong. It doesn't matter. A 6-second pause in a conversation feels like an eternity. Most people can't stand 3 seconds. I heard a long time ago that a moment was 3 seconds. And most people can't shut up for a second. But throw something out and count thousands to yourself slowly. Because right or wrong, you want what you said to have an impact. Give it time to have an impact before you jump in with more.
I've always said in coaching that the fastest way to the truth is through adversity. And that I like conflict. I'm used to it. It's comfortable for me.
It's inescapable aspect of life.
And you might as well learn to embrace it. It
Yeah.
didn't bother me. It doesn't bother me now. Your heart rate goes up, of course. Everyone's like, oh, well, you're not, like, wait a second. That's just a response. That doesn't mean that I'm not comfortable being here.
Right.
And I think one of two things happens. If you say something that I disagree with, I'm either going to challenge it and have greater conviction in my truth because I'm going to go deeper into what I feel is the better path and learn it and defend it and dial it in like a debate, right? Where I'm going to get, okay, my beliefs are getting challenged. I'll back up and I'll get more conviction into my truth, or I change. Both of them are good outcomes. Now, what I have learned is actually how to get there without offending the other person as often as I usually do because of the tactics that you're deploying and teaching. But it doesn't happen without practice. The first time I do it, I fuck it up a bunch, just so we are clear.
Everybody does.
Yeah. When you were in your earlier part of your career, did you make these mistakes? Because it seems like we start to take everything that's in the book, we start to work with you in courses and opportunities, and you do know you get better. Like it is one of those moments you're like, damn, like this shit worked. I didn't think it was going to work. And then it starts to work. But did you ever feel as like there were times where you were messing up?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Because it doesn't present itself. You say, of course, but that's today. And then the person, this is probably why maybe you show up as intimidating as you are, even with your sexy radio voice. But
well, if I may comment, like I know I have a resting serial killer face.
Sure.
So if I'm listening intently, people were like, you scared me. Like you thought you were thinking about chopping me up and having my liver with fava beans and a Chianti. And I'm like, oh, wow. You know, I that's how I look when I'm listening closely. And I think everybody has different looks on their face, but if you're really listening most of the time, a lot of people look angry, and I think that throws people off.
I have a lot of like inverse CIA, FBI tells because I was in those environments very young. So I would always invert what they would say that you do. You look down to the left, you look down to the right, you cross your arms, you're disengaged. And I was like 8 thinking to myself, like, bullshit. Like I was 8, 9 years old in these rooms. I applied to the Naval Academy growing up. That was kind of where I thought I would end up going. A lot of people in different environments. And I would be like, I would listen to all this stuff, interrogators and with a friend of mine right now, former CIA interrogator, right? And it's like very different side of things. But my thought was always like, that's such bullshit. Like I looked down to my left because I looked down to my left. I wasn't fucking lying. I didn't look up to the right, and that triggered my eyes to make me think of a creative idea to persuade you in a different way. Right. So I just became like the reverse tell of every book, you know. So like literally, if someone's telling you something that I'm super receptive, I just do this, and then I started to catch myself because I didn't want to be the textbook.
Right, yeah.
You know, so it was like my fight
It want
against
to be
these,
cliche.
yeah, there was this fight against this textbook. And I'd love to say that I'd like to fight against my own cliche. I don't want to be that. But these tactics that you deploy, you weren't always good at them. Like what happened? Like, because were you always on a call with somebody that you had to kind of get out in a life or death situation? Or did you work within smaller, stressful environments that weren't as potential risky?
All the above. I mean, when I first started learning it on a suicide hotline, crisis intervention. And, you know, what we call emotional intelligence now. And I remember at the time thinking like, why shouldn't everybody be the recipient of this? Like if this impacts somebody in crisis this quickly, this significantly, why shouldn't people in my real life be the recipients of understanding too, of empathy, of tactical empathy? And so then as I began to experiment with it, if it didn't work, then what I thought was the fundamental principles are sound, it's my application that's making the mistake. And then I began to learn the difference. It's one of the reasons why these days, every hostage negotiator you come across will say, yeah, this doesn't work at home. Yes, it does. You just aren't sophisticated enough to make it work at home. It's you learned the minimum and you didn't try to take it to the next level. You didn't try to get any more complicated. You didn't try to understand your adaptation. And a friend of mine has written a book where he went and got some training. He's a regular, not non-law enforcement guy. At the
You're going to say regular human beings.
Well, civilian. He's just okay. Regular. So yeah, he's an actual human. Yeah,
I just checking.
And you know, the NYPD say, yeah, stuff doesn't work at home. Well, what they're telling you is they're not that good. You know, they haven't, because there isn't a human being that doesn't deserve understanding. Like your spouse doesn't deserve understanding. Your spouse doesn't deserve empathy. Your adversaries, they don't deserve understanding. They're less likely to be adversaries, or they're less likely to be as combative.
I wonder if you've thought about this, because I'm watching it, you know, being around your ecosystem, seeing it from an outsider, now being able to be participating in some of the events, but being an outsider, going from someone that used tactical empathy to save someone's life to now using it and to deploy it to where you could change someone's life.
Yeah, good point.
Not being in an environment where most people do not make good decisions when their backs up against the wall.
Right.
You know, I mean, a boxer isn't doing as good on the ropes and they are managing the ring.
Right.
And if you're able to control your footwork and control space, and you could manage tempo and you could handle timing, you're then able to make them on their heels versus you being on your heels. And I have found that entrepreneurs normally make decisions when they're on their heels.
Yeah.
Versus doing it when you're moving forward.
When you're forced to make a decision.
Why are you always forcing making decisions when you're on your heels versus when you're actually moving forward? Because you make better decisions in momentum.
Yeah.
So most people are not willing to go through this work in their entrepreneur journey or in their life journey until they have a crisis hotline need.
Right. Right.
And I think that's probably why it's gained so much traction, is because you saved a life before you changed a life. And then when you started to change that, people started to deploy it that had good intent. People started to deploy it with
Right.
because it's kind of like the anger thing that you just taught me, which is like anger first and then you move into flow.
Yeah.
But you got to have enough awareness to then change in that to make that curve. If not, you could miss it, and then it could take you off a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But as you so eloquently shared, it gets you there faster.
Yeah.
And in my world, speed kills. So like that's my life. And I think the faster you do it, the better it is, because you'll figure it out quick. But if you have the skills to move from anger to flow, and you have the skills to say, hey, I'm gonna learn this skill when I'm in a dire need. And then you start applying it because it worked. It's like, oh shit, that worked. And then you start applying it, and then that reps, and you start to see it show up in other areas of your life. You'll start making much better decisions. And if you start making decisions in momentum, it just becomes, man, Chris is easy to talk to. Then it becomes, man, Chris is good to do business with.
Yep. Yep.
Then it becomes, you got to talk to people in Chris's team because that's a good environment.
Yeah.
Then it goes like, hey, you need they made it easy to work with.
Yep.
And I started to notice that the more that are involved, because people say that about our business in different ways, but then they also don't say it. And it's what they're not saying that we realize, if they're saying it about certain parts of our teams, but they're not saying it others, then well, why?
Yep.
Well, that's a reflection of me.
Yep.
And it's like, ooh, okay. We're not deploying these same things. We're really good at reactive, but we're not as good proactively doing it.
Yeah.
The tactics that you teach, tactical empathy specifically as a concept, could be applied to business, to the house, and serious situations. But it really has probably the most power, in my opinion, now in building better relationships.
Yep.
Because now all of a sudden you drive deeper.
Yeah.
And I feel that in my coaching, and just like in the small business journey that I've had, people come to me for results.
Yeah.
I need to get faster. I need to get stronger. I need to win. Coach Cav, like, you have a winning pedigree. You do something different. Good. That's tangible. That's seen. It's very clear. It's a transactional model. The next layer is resilience. We have to build a level of resilience to you so that when things aren't going well, you're still making the right decisions.
Yeah.
But that's not where the real work comes in, because that's why this is the results, why now is the timing. That's the resiliency. But the why me, why choose me, is because of the relationships.
Good point. Yes.
And that's the stuff that's not seen, that's not measured, that's the intangibles, because that's the only thing that's felt. And what you're doing is you're giving me the actual tactics to apply relationship work faster, to go from the above the surface work all the way to the down. And I want to say thank you for that, because it's made not just a massive impact in the business financially, but it's made a massive impact in the relationships. Some that when the people listen to this podcast can be like, son of a bitch, he got me,
In a good way.
in a good way.
Yeah.
But there's less resistance in some conversations that I used to be excited that I'm the tougher guy, because the conflict didn't bother me.
Right. Right.
So I could handle it. Just because you can't, that's your problem. You deal with it.
That's right.
And it's made a huge impact in me. So I want to say thank you for that.
That's cool. That's exactly the kind of stuff that I love to hear. Better relationships.
Those relationships, once you actually have a transformational relationship with an athlete, with an environment, but with a business, when a business to business is doing it, vendors, they could cut you out. There's another vendor. But what happens is when you deal with somebody that you're on the same wavelength with, you develop loyalty.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the pain to leave that is actually a really big deal. So I'm super excited that you're bringing life-changing tactics to, the business world, because the more it becomes life-changing and less life-saving, the better it actually gets. And I know that it's a numbers game, right? Where it's like, okay, you save somebody's life, and that is like a notch on your belt. But how many businesses change so many other people's lives because the business is actually growing,
Yeah.
and the business that doesn't have the ability to grow, unfortunately, is dying.
Yeah.
So it's like, which one happens? Which is the pain?
Yeah.
So I think it's super exciting. I encourage everyone else to jump in there and challenge yourself, because it is uncomfortable, because you get to 40 plus and you start to think like some things. I'm a baby compared to you. I want to establish that, but it is
Real, eh?
it is. So I think that what's really cool is the more we encourage people to do that, I think the better business deals will get done.
Amen.
Not deals that are better deals,
Better business.
but
yeah.
better business.
Better business.
And I think if you could build a better business, then what ends up happening is it has longevity.
Yep.
And that longevity will preserve based upon the original story.
Yeah.
And those relationships will then build a legacy. But you can't build a legacy without a true story that then other people could tell.
Okay.
So I think you're telling a really cool story that's not going to get lost. There's, thousands of other people that have been in the line of work that are outside of civilian line of work that is tough. My dad was a firefighter. My aunts, uncles were police officers. My brother was a firefighter. My dad's never going to tell his story. That's not him. That goes into a deep, past. And he had a Golden Mike Award. He could talk to anybody. But when he was done, he closed the book and it was over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He don't want those lessons to be passed on. He passed them on through me. He passed them on through my brother and some intimate people. But unless you were in that circle, the digital age didn't get you. And now you have the ability to you're no longer attached to proximity as the limitation.
Good point.
The proximity is based upon the individual committing to pressing a button, to getting in your world. But your ecosystem, I think, is now expanding globally. 5 million copies. You built a bestseller. You didn't write a bestseller. You built a bestseller because it was built upon, what your legacy is going to be. And I think it's really cool. And now you mentioned something that I thought is concerning. You said Chris Voss is going to die in the saddle. It's part of the genetics.
Yeah.
What does that
That'll
mean?
mean I don't plan on dying anytime soon.
Good.
But
What does that mean, though?
well, a friend of mine, Dan Sullivan, and he coaches me. He runs an outfit called Strategic Coach, and there's a bunch of entrepreneurs that he coaches. And Dan says a retirement is an email to the universe to pick up the body.
Ooh, that hurts.
And so I'm like, just what I do for a living keeps me alive. And so my purpose, I'm going to stick at it until suddenly I find myself standing up in front of the pearly gates and, St. Peter's like, you got some stuff you got to answer for here.
Might be a pretty big list.
We need you to explain this. Want to hear what you have to say.
I hope all things are forgiven. I think I hope that I don't have to relive decisions that I've made and probably will continue to make.
Yeah.
I think you started it well, where we're all flawed men. And I think if you do try to do good in the world, you can, make a difference if you pass that legacy. Now you're sharing the difference through bourbon.
The bourbon's out now.
And as a bourbon fan, what's that like? This idea of now you're creating a product.
It's very surreal and completely unexpected. And the fun thing about it is it's fun. Like
hell yeah, it's fun. It's cool. I know that it may be fun you doing it. Freaking cool.
It's just fun. The guy, there's three of us. It was really the brainchild of a friend of mine, Nick Nanton,
Great.
did the documentary.
Yeah.
And Nick makes sure that whatever endeavor we're engaged in, we're going to have a lot of fun.
Nice.
And so it's available via subscription only. It's called The Difference. And the other night we were in Louisville, and Louisville's got tons of like little hidden gem restaurants.
Oh, tons. A little Irish pub, and then speakeasy in the back, and then gray bar. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're at this phenomenal place for dinner. I wish I could remember off the top of my head. I regret not being able to remember the name of the restaurant. But it was, and I got to look, because we give these guys a shout out because the food was so good. Wednesday night. we got North. I think the name of the place was North Bourbon in Louisville, 935 Goss Avenue.
You're in Louisville and you don't go to North Bourbon. You're missing out.
Food was great, but we had a ball.
How was the service?
Food is great. It's a tiny little place. If you got 50 people in a place, probably jammed.
Wow.
They treated us. The food was phenomenal. They treated us like kings, and everybody that came, Nick was telling them about how you got a subscription. But more important, everybody had a great time that night. We ate great food. We tasted the bourbon. We shared it. We had a lot of laughs, and a significant number of the people that came to the dinner ended up buying subscriptions to the bourbon to get it shipped to them on a regular basis. But everybody that went had a ball. And that's the most fun thing about it. People that are in the retail liquor business, it ain't fun for them.
No.
Like, all right, yeah, so I invested in Kendall Jenner's tequila. But, they're looking at the mailbox, waiting for the return on their investment.
Sure.
Like, nobody's looking at the mailbox that's involved in this. They're looking forward to the next dinner we have, where we get to tell stories, where we get to enjoy being with each other. And that's the fun thing about it.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's cool that you're doing cool shit and having fun doing it with good people. I do like to believe if you make memories, you'll make money.
Yeah.
But if you focus on just the cash outcome, what ends up happening is your intent and your actions change automatically.
You're Scrooge.
And yeah, no one likes that. It's not fun. I'm inspired.
I'm going to have to get rolling pretty quick.
I'm inspired by what you're doing, and you got a subscription. But if you guys haven't read the book, 5 other million people on the planet have. I'm sure there's probably another one in you, and I'm sure that there's a lot of amazing things that people could do with the impact that you're making with them. So thank you so much.
That's very kind of you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.